I always knew doing business with friends, family, and especially your wife was a bad idea. It works for a while, until the feelings fade, until the trust breaks, until your partner starts finding comfort in other people's arms, while still signing your name on paperwork like everything is fine. That is what happened to me. This is not a story I plan to tell. But sometimes, silence protects the wrong people for too long. This is my story, about betrayal, about what I lost, and what I did to take it all back. People always said Valerie and I had it all. A successful business, a beautiful home, a marriage that looked strong from the outside. We were Tom and Valerie King, co-founders of King and Gray Financial. And for a long time, that name meant something in Austin. Clients trusted us. Partners respected us. We were the polished couple shaking hands at fundraisers, speaking at business panels, smiling in magazine spreads. We built the firm from a folding table and 2 laptops in a rented office, and turned it into a company with real weight. 20 employees, multi-state clients, a name that opened doors. But glass walls let people see in. And over time, they started to see the cracks. I noticed the signs early, but ignored them. At first, it was subtle. Valerie stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped asking how my day was. Her phone, once left on the counter without a second thought, was now always in her pocket. Always locked. Always silent. There were late nights. Networking events I was not invited to. Industry mixers where she went alone, dressed a little too sharp for the guest list. The excuses came easy to her. She had a gift for saying the right thing with just enough eye contact to make you question yourself. But I knew. I did not have proof, not yet. Just instincts. And instincts are not enough in court. That was the problem. We co-owned everything. 50-50. Every account. Every asset. Every client. Valerie and I were legally tied to the same machine. And if I filed for divorce with no clear evidence of wrongdoing, she would walk away with half the company I had poured my life into. That would not just be personal. It would be professional suicide. Clients would question our stability. Partners would pull back. The brand we had built would crack, and cracks spread fast in this industry. I was not angry. Not yet. I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of the fake smiles. Tired of lying to myself that this was just a rough patch. We had passed that line a long time ago. What made it worse was how visible it became. I started noticing the way people looked at me. The polite head tilts. The way conversations shifted when I walked into a room. Old friends asking questions with their eyes, but never with their mouths. One afternoon, my oldest friend Dan pulled me aside during a conference lunch. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, very carefully, "Are you and Valerie doing all right?" I told him we were fine. Just busy. He nodded. Said nothing else. He did not need to. That night I went home, poured myself a drink, and sat alone in my office. The lights were low. The house was quiet. Valerie was still out at some reception downtown. I did not ask which one. She did not offer to tell me. I sat there for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I had not called in years. Mitchell Carr. He used to work private security for high-level corporate clients. Quiet guy. Smart. Trusted. He had helped me once before during a merger dispute. I knew he would not ask the wrong questions. When he answered, I said one sentence. I need someone she will fall for. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Tell me what you were dealing with." So I did. Everything. And by the end of that conversation, I was no longer tired. I was focused. Once you suspect something, you start seeing everything differently. People say more with a glance than they do with words. Especially in the business world, where discretion is currency. No one ever said anything directly to me, but the silence began to speak loud enough. A junior partner who used to ask me for advice suddenly started avoiding eye contact. Our receptionist, Claire, stopped offering small talk in the mornings. A few longtime clients began requesting to meet with Valerie instead of me, even when I had handled their portfolios personally for years. I could feel the shift, like something had turned in the room whenever I walked in. Like I had become the man everyone was too polite to pity out loud. And that was worse than anything Valerie had done. I have always believed a man's reputation is earned, not given. Mine was built over 3 decades. I was the steady one, the problem solver, the one who showed up early and stayed late. Valerie was the face, the energy, the social magnet. But I was the foundation. Without that, the whole thing falls apart. I could feel it crumbling. It is a strange thing. Knowing people are whispering behind your back about something you have not been able to prove. They do not know the details, but they know enough to make you feel exposed. Stripped of control. And control was the one thing I still had. I never brought it up to Valerie. There was no point. She would deny it. She would smile. She would deflect. And then she would go right back to doing whatever it was she had been doing, only with more caution. Instead, I kept working. I handled the books. I kept the client calls flowing. I kept smiling at the same networking events while Valerie floated from one group to another, her hand resting on a wine glass, her eyes always scanning for someone more interesting than the man she came with. One evening, after a business dinner that felt more like theater, I sat on the back patio with a drink in my hand, staring at the lights from the city skyline. Valerie had gone inside hours ago. No goodnight. No conversation. Just the sound of her heels walking away. That night, I got a message from Mitchell. He had someone. His name was Blake. Early 30s, clean-cut, educated, smart. Mitchell wrote. He knows how to listen. Women notice him, but he does not chase. He lets them feel like they are doing the choosing. It sounded perfect. Valerie never responded well to obvious attention. She needed subtlety. A man who knew how to let her believe it was all her idea. I agreed. A few days later, Mitchell sent me Blake's photo. Just a headshot, business casual. The kind of face that looks good in any room. Calm, confident, forgettable in the best way. That same week, Mitchell sent me Blake's cover. A story, a background, a reason to be in her orbit. They had built him into a small-scale entrepreneur, specializing in scaling wellness brands and luxury service companies. Vague enough to pass. Polished enough to interest her. I gave the green light. And then I did the hardest thing of all. I waited. I kept going to work like nothing was happening. I kept smiling. I kept shaking hands. I kept sharing the same kitchen with a woman I no longer trusted, knowing that soon, the truth would come out. But not yet. Blake needed time. Valerie needed space. And I needed patience. Because the next move would not be loud. It would be precise. The first time Valerie saw Blake, it was not planned to be dramatic. That was never the goal. Mitchell had made it clear, if she felt like she was being targeted, the entire operation would collapse. It had to feel natural. Like fate. Like coincidence dressed in a suit. The setup took place at a wellness event hosted by one of our longtime clients. Valerie had recently joined their advisory board, mostly for the exposure. These events were her playground. Upscale, image-conscious, full of people who loved the sound of their own voices. A perfect environment. Blake was already there when she arrived. He was dressed sharp, but not flashy. Tailored blazer, relaxed posture, one hand casually holding a drink. He was talking with two brand representatives about a boutique fitness startup that did not actually exist. Mitchell had prepared him well. Valerie noticed him. Of course she did. Blake had been placed exactly where her path would lead. But he did not make the first move. He let her circle. Let her glance. Let her curiosity do the work. She made the first approach, asking a question about one of the brands. Blake answered simply, respectfully, then excused himself a moment later with a polite smile. He left before dessert was served. Perfect. A week later, they ran into each other again. This time at an industry charity auction downtown. He was standing near the wine table, admiring one of the prints up for bidding. Valerie approached with confidence. She remembered him. She made that clear. They talked longer this time. Mitchell gave me the report the next morning. Blake had complimented her taste in art, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh once, lightly. Then, just when she started leaning in, he said he had a meeting to get to and disappeared into the crowd. The absence worked better than attention. By the third time they met, a small business roundtable mixer, Valerie was the one seeking him out. Blake played it slow. He told her about his work, carefully shaped to sound both exclusive and mysterious. A consulting firm for emerging luxury brands. Mostly wellness, some high-end hospitality. No fixed office. Just high-value, high-mobility partnerships. Valerie asked for his card. He said he had run out. Instead, they exchanged numbers. I read that update twice when it came in. It was not just happening. It was working. I kept everything inside. Said nothing at home. At the office, I played my role. The loyal business partner. The committed husband. Valerie was lighter, more energized, more present in the mirror than in our meetings. That told me everything I needed to know. She started going out more often. Last-minute events. Advisory dinners. Drinks with potential partners. Always with a reason. always with a smile, and always without me. I did not question it. That would have broken the illusion. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to believe she was choosing this, that she had the power. Blake was trained for this exact rhythm. He sent short, casual texts, responded with just enough delay to seem busy. He complimented her mind more than her looks. He told her he appreciated ambition. That word always worked on her. They met for drinks, then coffee, then dinner, each one initiated by her. By the time she invited him to a private networking retreat outside the city, one that, according to her, was not worth dragging me to, I knew what was coming. Mitchell had already secured the surveillance. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. And I had never said a word. Valerie had always liked to believe she was in control. Even in moments when she was being pulled towards something, she convinced herself it was her choice. That was her strength. And her weakness. By the time the private retreat came around, she had already rewritten the story in her head. Blake was not a fling. He was not a risk. He was an opportunity. A fresh chapter. Something that made her feel alive again. She told me she would be gone for 2 nights. Said it was a last-minute event with potential investors from the West Coast. Nothing exciting, she added, already packing her bag. Probably just a lot of wine and buzzwords. I nodded, pretending not to notice the dress she folded carefully into the side pocket of her suitcase. One I had not seen in over a year. She left that Friday afternoon. The car service pulled up right on time. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine, and then she was gone, off to a resort 2 hours outside the city, where Mitchell had already secured everything we needed. Discretion was key. No hidden cameras in private spaces. Nothing illegal. But everything outside the walls, public areas, lobbies, hallway footage was fair game. And more than enough. Valerie met Blake at the front entrance. They arrived separately, just like planned. She smiled when she saw him, adjusted her hair, touched his arm in a way she had not touched mine in years. Mitchell's team observed, documented, and stepped back. Inside the hotel, Valerie signed them in under her name. Said she would cover the cost. That was important. It made her the initiator. Later that evening, the two of them were seen at dinner, laughing, leaning in close, toasting to partnership. Nothing explicit, nothing dramatic, but everything was clear. And later, much later, hallway footage confirmed they entered the same suite. Only one returned to the hallway that night. The next morning, they had breakfast together in the garden lounge. Valerie looked radiant, lighter, younger, even. She wore sunglasses and a loose smile, like someone who had just stepped into a dream she had been hoping for. She had no idea that every smile, every glance, every recorded step was being quietly filed into a folder already labeled with her name. She returned home on Sunday evening. She looked tired, but satisfied, like a woman who believed she had done something thrilling and gotten away with it. I asked her how the retreat went. She said, productive. Then she changed the subject. I said nothing else. Over the next few days, she was different. In small, specific ways. She spent more time getting ready in the mornings. She hummed while making coffee. She wore perfume on weekdays. She was careful with her phone. Careful not to leave it anywhere unattended. Careful not to leave traces. But she did not know I already had what I needed. Mitchell delivered the package to my office in person. A plain black folder. Inside were still images, timelines, transcriptions of messages, phone logs, and a summary of everything collected. There were no guesses, no assumptions, just facts, lined up in order. I flipped through the pages one by one, slowly, thoroughly. When I finished, I closed the folder and set it on my desk. I did not feel anger. I felt clarity. This was not about revenge. Not for me. This was business. And now, I had the leverage I needed to protect what I built. All that remained was timing. The next move would not be explosive. It would be quiet, strategic, permanent. There is a difference between knowing something and proving it. For months, I had known. Now, I had proof. And that changed everything. The folder Mitchell gave me was simple. No labels. No drama. Just a clean summary of events, supported by documentation that would stand in court. Photographs. Message transcripts. Call logs. Security footage. All of it gathered legally. All of it traceable. All of it damning. There were screenshots of her text conversations with Blake. Not explicit, but emotional. Deep enough to leave no doubt. Messages like, "You make me feel like myself again," and "I forgot how good it feels to be wanted." That kind of language carries weight when a marriage is supposed to be intact. There were timestamps, locations, hotel records, room numbers, details that connected her movements exactly to his. The dinner reservations, the joint check-ins, even a printed receipt from the resort bar where she had signed for a bottle of wine under her own name. It was all there, neatly arranged, dated, organized. I read through it slowly, not to torture myself, but to prepare. I needed to understand exactly what I was holding, because what I had now was not just personal closure. It was leverage. With this, I could approach the divorce from a completely different position. In our state, infidelity carries legal consequences in property division, and our firm, King and Gray Financial, was technically marital property. But proven misconduct could tip the scales, especially if it could be shown that she had used business funds or business travel to facilitate any part of it. Mitchell had confirmed that one of the hotels was booked using our shared corporate credit card. That alone would speak volumes in court. I met with my attorney the next morning, a man I trusted, quiet, strategic, the kind who never made promises, but always delivered. He read through the folder without speaking. When he finished, he closed it and looked at me carefully. "This is enough," he said. "You will not get everything, but you will get the part that matters. Control." That was all I needed to hear. We began preparing the paperwork, not just for divorce, but for ownership negotiations, asset realignment, client communication protocols. Everything would need to be airtight. The firm had to survive this, not just legally, but publicly. The plan was not to attack. It was to outmaneuver. No press, no accusations, no social media leaks. Just a private conversation that led to a professional settlement. If she cooperated, if she did not, then the folder would become public record. And I knew Valerie well enough to know that she valued her image even more than her shares. At home, I kept my routine unchanged. I still woke up early, still made coffee, still answered emails at the kitchen table like I always had. Valerie barely noticed. She was distracted, floating. Her meetings with Blake continued. I knew about each one. Not from her, of course, but from Mitchell's updates. I never asked questions. I just waited. Patience, I realized, is not about doing nothing. It is about doing everything silently. Late one evening, after she came home from yet another strategy dinner, I looked across the table at her and said, "We need to schedule a time to talk." She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About the business," I said. "About next steps." She looked unsure for a moment, then smiled. I figured this might come up eventually. She thought she was in control. She had no idea. There is a strange kind of peace that comes when everything is finally clear. It was not relief. It was not joy. It was control. For the first time in over a year, I was no longer reacting. I was leading. Every word, every movement, every decision from this point on would serve a purpose. After reviewing the case materials with my attorney, we established a timeline. The plan was to give Valerie one opportunity to walk away quietly. No courtroom spectacle, no media fallout, no public embarrassment. But she would have to give up her share of the business. In return, she would keep her personal assets, her car, and a cash settlement that would allow her to start over. It was more than fair, considering what she had done. And we both knew she could do worse in court if it came to that. The paperwork was drawn up. A single envelope. No threats. No anger. Just facts, presented with calm finality. Now it was time to talk. I asked her to meet me in our conference room at the office. Not at home. Not over dinner. Not somewhere sentimental. This was business now. That is all that was left between us. She arrived 10 minutes late, as usual. Perfectly styled. Confident. Her smile was professional but relaxed. She thought this would be about strategy. Company growth. Maybe even a rebrand. "Something on your mind?" she asked, setting her phone down screen side down on the table. "Yes," I said. "It is time we discuss the future of King and Gray." Her expression did not change, but I saw the shift in her eyes. I slid the envelope across the table toward her. She paused. "What is this?" she asked. "An option," I said. "A fair one." She opened it slowly. "Read the top sheet. Then the second." Her fingers tightened slightly as she flipped through the pages. "I do not understand," she said. But she did. She understood exactly what she was looking at. I gave her the courtesy of silence. Let her read every line. When she reached the last page, she leaned back and looked at me. "You are serious about this?" "Yes," I said. "And if I say no?" Then we move forward through the court system, I replied, with all documentation on the record. She scoffed. A short, dry sound. You went to a lot of trouble, she said. Hiring someone. Following me. Spying on me like a criminal. No, I said. I protected my interests. You chose your actions. I just recorded the result. She shook her head slowly, like she was trying to summon outrage but could not quite find it. This will destroy everything, she said. Our image. Our brand. Only if you force it into the spotlight, I said. I am offering you a way to leave with dignity. Quietly. Privately. No one has to see anything. She did not speak for a long time. Finally, she asked, is this really worth burning it all down? No, I said. That is why I am giving you the chance to walk away before it does. She looked down at the envelope again. Read one of the paragraphs a second time. Then she pushed it back across the table. I need time. Take it, I said. But not too much. She gathered her things and left the room without another word. I remained seated. I did not feel triumph. Just confirmation. She now knew what I knew. And the next move would be hers. 3 days passed before Valerie responded. No texts. No questions. No late-night accusations or defensive outbursts. Just silence. I went to work like always. Handled client calls. Reviewed quarterly reports. Gave my usual Monday briefing to the team. No one in the office knew anything had changed, but everything had. On Wednesday morning, I received an email from her attorney. Formal language. Careful phrasing. A request for a meeting to review and discuss the proposed settlement. That meant she had read the documents. And she knew I was not bluffing. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. Private. Off-site. Just me, my attorney, Valerie, and hers. We met in a small conference room at a law office downtown. Clean table. Water pitcher. Nothing personal. Nothing warm. Valerie wore a dark blazer and minimal makeup. Her attorney sat beside her mid-40s, smart, professional, and clearly not thrilled about the position his client had put him in. My attorney opened with calm language. Explained the reasoning behind the settlement. The financial breakdown. The clean transition of company ownership. The agreed non-disclosure clause. The confidentiality protections. He did not mention the evidence unless they did. They did. Valerie's attorney asked to clarify the relevance of a few items in the file. My attorney handed him the sealed packet, the one marked Exhibit A. He flipped it open, read the summary at the top, then handed it to Valerie without a word. She did not look at me. She just read. Her hands were steady. Her face stayed composed. But the silence around her was loud. You had someone follow me, she finally said. No, I replied. I had someone observe. And record. You were not forced. You were not trapped. You were simply documented. You were planning this, she said. For how long? Long enough, I answered. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat. We would like time to review this material before proceeding. Of course, my attorney said. But just to be clear, the offer stands as written. If we go to court, this entire file becomes public record. If we settle, it does not. Valerie looked up. This is blackmail, she said. No, I said. This is accountability. She opened her mouth like she had more to say, then stopped. For the first time in months, she looked unsure. Not angry. Not defensive. Just exposed. And it was not just about the affair. It was about everything. The lies. The manipulation. The way she had played both sides of our life, the business partner in daylight, and someone else entirely once the sun went down. She had assumed I would either never find out or be too weak to act if I did. She had miscalculated, and I had been patient enough to let her. The meeting ended quietly. No agreement signed that day, but no denial either. Just silence. Paperwork. The weight of truth hanging over the table. That night, back at home, we barely spoke. She went to bed early. I stayed in my office, going over the next steps with my attorney by phone. There were still signatures needed. Still technicalities to finalize. But the direction was clear. Valerie knew the war was over. All that was left now was how she wanted to surrender privately and clean, or publicly and broken. When I walked into the kitchen to pour myself a drink, I noticed something for the first time in months. Her phone was sitting on the counter. Unlocked. Face up. And no one was messaging her. The day of the hearing arrived without drama. No shouting. No phone calls in the middle of the night. No emotional breakdowns. Just a court date, a time, and 2 lawyers ready to speak louder than either of us. We walked into the courthouse through separate doors. I wore a navy suit. The same one I had worn the day we signed our first big client 10 years ago. Valerie wore gray. Minimal jewelry. No eye contact. Her attorney looked tired. Mine looked ready. We sat across from each other at the long wooden table, two people who had once built a life together, now reduced to legal filings and court protocol. The judge was calm and methodical, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no time for nonsense. My attorney began with a brief statement, outlining the terms we were presenting and the supporting evidence behind them. He handed the judge a copy of the file, a redacted version, focused on financial relevance and legal context. No tabloid material. Just facts. Valerie's attorney tried to argue for a standard 50-50 division. But once the judge reviewed the file, her tone changed. She asked direct questions. Did the respondent use marital or business funds during these extramarital activities? Yes, my attorney said. We have documentation of 2 transactions made using joint business accounts. Is there evidence that these meetings took place during claimed business-related events? Yes, Your Honor. Dates and timestamps align with events she reported as professional obligations. Valerie shifted in her chair. For the first time, her polished posture slipped. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. Tapped her heel against the floor, quietly but fast. Her attorney asked for a recess. The judge allowed 10 minutes. I stayed seated. Valerie stood and walked out of the room with her lawyer. When they returned, she had her expression back in place, calm, composed, detached. But something in her eyes had dulled. The judge called the session back to order. I have reviewed the materials submitted, she said. In light of the evidence presented, the court finds grounds for disproportionate division of shared assets. The petitioner will retain controlling ownership of King and Gray Financial, as well as the primary business accounts and physical property associated with the firm. Valerie's attorney objected, weakly. The judge acknowledged his protest, then overruled it. I watched Valerie as the words landed. She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply nodded once and stared straight ahead. The hearing continued, wrapping up loose ends. Personal property was divided. A non-disclosure agreement was formalized. Neither of us would speak publicly about the contents of the settlement. Not that I ever planned to. We exited the courthouse the same way we entered, separately. Outside, the sky was gray and dry. The kind of weather that makes everything feel still. I stood by my car for a moment and looked back. Valerie was speaking to her attorney by the sidewalk. Her hands were moving slightly, like she was trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. The man she had tried to manipulate had outmaneuvered her. Not with rage. With discipline. With facts. With truth. That was the last time I saw her in person. No calls. No messages. No parting words. Just silence. And to me, that was enough. In the weeks after the court decision, Valerie disappeared from most of our usual circles. Not literally. She was still in the city. Still posting curated photos on social media. Still pretending nothing had changed. But the difference was clear, and it was spreading. Our clients noticed first. King and Gray had been a package deal for years. People bought into the dynamic. The strong, composed husband who handled the strategy. The sharp, elegant wife who handled the relationships. Once word got out that Valerie was no longer with the firm, questions began to surface. She made a public statement 2 days after the court order was finalized. It was short, careful. She thanked the team, expressed pride in what we had built, and said she was moving on to independent consulting opportunities. She did not mention me. She did not mention the divorce. She just stepped sideways, as if no one would look too closely. But people did. The professional world does not forget fast. Some of our clients left with her at first, out of habit or loyalty. Within a month, most had quietly returned. The few who did not quickly learned that without the structure of the firm behind her, Valerie's charm was not enough to manage portfolios, forecast risks, or lead serious financial strategy. She launched a small consulting brand, gave it a sleek name, built a polished website, hired a PR firm to help with optics. But the buzz never came. A few news outlets reached out for quotes, but no one published anything with substance. Everyone could sense something had gone wrong. They just did not know what. And she was not about to tell them. People love a comeback story, but only when the fall is public. Valerie had vanished without explanation, and that made her a risk. Potential partners stepped back. Sponsors withdrew. The corporate world does not invest in silence. At the same time, whispers began to circulate in the background. Former clients talked. Industry assistants shared stories. A few sharp-eyed professionals pieced together what had happened. It did not take long before her name stopped opening doors. Events where she used to be a guest of honor now left her off the list. One of our mutual friends, a woman named Lisa, called me one afternoon. I saw her at a luncheon, she said. She looked different. She came alone. No one really spoke to her after the first few minutes. It was awkward. I did not ask for details. I did not need them. At home, I kept everything quiet. I took down the few framed photos that remained, cleared her old office, told our staff that any inquiries about Valerie should be directed to legal. No opinions, no gossip, just policy. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was hers. It was only a few lines. I never thought you would actually do it. I thought I knew how this would end. I was wrong. You win. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. This was not about winning. This was about surviving. About protecting something I had built with both hands while she was looking elsewhere. Valerie did not collapse overnight. But slowly and unmistakably, she faded. Not because I tore her down, but because she had no foundation to stand on once the image cracked. She built her world on admiration. And now, no one was watching. Life did not change all at once. There was no moment of celebration, no grand announcement, no victory toast. Just a slow, steady shift, like a tide pulling in, quiet and strong. After the court ruled in my favor, the real work began. I met with every department head. I sat down with each client who stayed and personally thanked them. I showed up early, stayed late, and made sure my name, my real name, not just the one on the door, meant something again. People noticed. Not because I made noise, but because I did not. I kept my voice steady, my work consistent, my decisions thoughtful. When I changed the company name from King and Gray Financial to Greystone Advisory Group, I sent out a single statement. It said, "The past is behind us. What we build next will speak for itself." That was enough. Over the next 6 months, we signed 3 new clients. 2 old ones returned after hearing that things had stabilized. I hired new analysts, gave bonuses to the ones who had stayed loyal, and reinvested in the team. We rebuilt, not fast, but right. As for Valerie, I did not follow her story. People tried to bring it up now and then. At conferences. Over drinks. I always changed the subject. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. What happened between us was over. And I did not need her name in my mouth to feel whole again. I started going on walks in the evenings. Just me and the sound of my shoes on the sidewalk. I stopped bringing work home. Started reading again. Books with paper pages and quiet endings. I reconnected with a few old friends I had neglected over the years, not because of her, but because of how hard I had worked to hold everything together. One of them, a man named Carl, asked me over coffee, "Do you regret it?" "Any of it?" I took a long breath before I answered. "No," I said. "I regret not seeing it sooner, but I do not regret fixing it." A few months later, I bought a small cabin just outside of town, not for running away, for breathing. I went out there on weekends, sometimes alone, sometimes with a book and a fishing pole I barely used. It was quiet, and the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. I never became bitter. That was important to me. I did not want to become one of those men who spent the rest of his life talking about what she did, what she took, how unfair it all was. She took nothing I did not give, and everything I had built, the real parts, the solid parts, I still had. One evening, I sat on the porch of that cabin with a cup of coffee in my hand, watching the sky turn orange over the hills, and I realized something I had not been able to admit before. I was proud of myself, not for winning, not for outsmarting her, but for walking through fire without turning to ash. That is all a man can really ask for in the end. Not to avoid the pain, but to come out the other side of it more honest than he went in.